Welcome to the Healing Growth Podcast, the podcast that talks about healing trauma in an African context. My name is Saiton. Today, we're going to talk about what next after realizing that you have trauma or childhood wounds that you'd like to deal with. Karibu. Thank you so much for all the feedback, all the love that you've shown me for the inaugural podcast. I truly loved hearing your feedback, hearing your comments, and hearing your stories. I appreciate you all, and I'm glad you're all part of this journey. Today, as we talk about what next, I want to share a few stories, a few impulses, and what I've learned through my journey, and a few suggestions that you can pick from and you can learn from, and maybe you can implement as you go along. One of the hardest things about childhood trauma is that it affects our responses as adults and how we think, how we process, and how we act. As a child, when you have a problem, what you're supposed to do is tell your parents. And they are supposed to fix it, or at least comfort you, or find a solution to help you deal with whatever it is. What happens, however, when it is them or a situation around them that causes the issue? Many times we don't realize it, but we often get stuck when we don't know how to approach them or what to tell them. Even now as adults, our immediate reaction is to want to tell them and to have a conversation with them, especially if the problem is a recurring one. What I'd like to say is, before you do this, just pause and let's take that apart a little bit. One of the most difficult realizations I had is that your parent can't fix things as an adult. They can step in certain ways, but they can't fix especially the things of the heart and the things of the soul and the pains that we're feeling. It's often devastating. And as children, we grow up thinking that our parents can do and fix everything. And sometimes as adults, we haven't quite let go of that. When it comes to childhood trauma, your parent can't go back in time and undo what they did and do the thing that you need them to do or the thing that you needed them to do then. An apology would be nice, but we often find that apologies are not enough to soothe the original pain and the consequences and to undo all the things that you picked up on the journey. As an adult, you can tell them many times what happened, but it results in defensiveness, gaslighting, and more strife and conflict. And even if they can do a genuine apology, they often don't know what to do next. This seeking them out to sort of fix is primarily a child's need that wasn't met when you were young. And in many ways, it's abandoning yourself to give somebody else responsibility over you to fix it. One of the most, I keep saying painful, but these things are very painful and devastating. A devastating truth I came across as I was healing was that the trauma was not my fault, but the healing was my responsibility. And so I say to you, the trauma is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. It doesn't seem fair, and it's something I remember being very angry about for a while and feeling like it was yet another heavy load to carry on. And why was it up to me to fix and wade through all of this that I didn't cause? However, the truth is, as an adult, my quality of life and inner life experience is my responsibility. And once you begin to acknowledge that and move forward, it sets you free. It sets you free from the waiting for somebody else to do something for you. Often in the waiting, we fantasize about how if they do this one thing, it'll change everything in our lives and it'll give us the freedom and the soothing that we need and the impulse to move forward. It's not up to them, but it is up to you. One of the things I would recommend to help you learn more about this is a book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. If you go to the healing.growth Instagram page, there are copies available for 3,000 Kenya shillings. Do get in touch and we'll be happy to sort you out. The next point is that ignoring it won't make it go away. Uncovering issues and having open conversations about things like this is something that we do not know how to do. As a culture and society, we've learned to sweep things under the rug and pretend it doesn't exist. You can have a small mountain in your sitting room and everyone maneuvers around it, accommodating it and pretending it's not there. It's what we were taught growing up, and it's what many of us adopted. However, do it long enough and you discover that the mountain becomes even bigger, and that if enough time passes, nothing you do will help you avoid seeing it. Our generation has kings and queens of ignoring things. It's a skill many of us would easily get 10 out of 10 straight A's without much effort. We ignore by doing things excessively, like drinking, partying, working, indulging in too many ventures at once, indulging in illegal things, even something like getting into multiple relationships at once, just to avoid the loneliness or the internal storms we have. But all of this leads us to ruining the good things that we have. Truth is, many of us are wounded children in adult bodies, and it doesn't go away until you deal with it. I saw this quote from Nedra Tawwab recently. She said, due to generational trauma, some people don't have elders. They have people in their family who have grown older but not wiser. For many of us, we know who this is, but what we don't realize is by not dealing with it, we're also becoming those people. If we're honest with ourselves, we would like to do better. We would like to leave different legacies as compared to what we found. But to do this, you owe it to yourself to be brave, and which for me means doing something even when you're afraid or trembling, and unravel the things that you've never talked about or even allowed yourself to think about. I saw something yesterday that it was a video, and the guy was saying, we don't always have to do things when we're bold and shoulders squared up and feeling brave. It's okay to do things as you're trembling and trust that God will hold your hand through the healing. I pray that you're able to be honest with God about needing the help to uncover, assess, and heal the wounds, and also process your experience. That He will lead you to the right therapist, the right books, the right accounts, and the right people who can walk this journey with you. For the people who are believers and people of faith, this is especially for you. There's something called spiritual bypassing. You cannot spiritually bypass your pain and experience. Spiritual bypassing is defined as the tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. One of my favorite books of the Bible is the Psalms, written by King David. In there, you find him talking about his hopelessness, his depression. He's a man overcome by his circumstances and seeking solace and rescuing, all very much human emotions. He eventually gets to a place of hope and joy, but to get there, how we are wired as humans is that we need to feel the feelings, we need to mourn, we need to cry, we need to feel the desolation as part of the healing. The world calls it hitting the rock bottom, but whatever you may call it, it is a necessary part of the human experience. Without that sorrow, without that desolate feeling, you don't appreciate the joy as much or value it as much as you could. And while we do not look for it and while we do not seek it, it inevitably is part of the human experience. And what we can do is learn to go through the motions of feeling this pain, feeling the loneliness, dealing with it in the ways that are healthy, and then getting to the point where you're able to overcome it and create systems and structures that support your healing and support you as a human being, creating a community. Oftentimes it comes from hitting rock bottom, that you understand what is truly important to you and what is truly valuable to you. And then from there, you're able to build a life that reflects who you are and what you desire. We definitely need prayer and fasting if you choose to, and for sure reading your Bible, but you also must learn to resolve emotional issues, to take responsibility for your actions and apologize where necessary and repair relationships that you need to. These are all things that require skills. And just as we learn maths or learn to cook, these are learnings and an education that's essential to the human experience and the relationships that we have with our spouses, our partners, our colleagues, our children, friends, and community. It's not demeaning to admit that you don't know or that you've made choices that have hurt those that you love. Our best is only what we know, but there's definitely more to learn. We need to be able to acknowledge our ignorance and choose to not be too proud to do the right thing. All this is learning, and it does not take away from your faith. If anything, it enhances it instead. So then, how do you do all of this? I'll give you a couple of things that I have done and carried with me, and you can pick up from here and see what works for you. The first one is honesty with myself. And so I encourage you to be honest with yourself. Too often we lie to ourselves. And sometimes it's so hard to admit to yourself that you're hurt and that something has knocked you down. I remember that as children, we'd sometimes say, hata sijasikia vibaya. Translation, I haven't even felt bad. And we carry this over to adulthood. We've made it a joke about kuoga na kurudi soko, which I don't even know how to translate from this very Kenyan expression, but basically after a breakup, immediately getting back into the dating scene. But I have questions. What about your heart? What about the hopes and dreams you had with this person? What about letting go of the friendships and the things that were and moments that were unique to just the two of you? There's such grief in letting go of anything, whether or not it was a good or bad relationship. Take time to feel, to process, and let go. And understand it's not an instant thing. We constantly miss people who were in our lives and who had to leave, whether or not it was a good reason. Take time to journal, to get a therapist, vocalize the truth of what this ending means to you. We all need friends we can talk to. It may not be all your friends, but at least one or two who can listen and hold space for you as you process. Another thing we need to be honest about to ourselves is the motivations of our decisions. Are you able to admit to yourself when you made a decision out of jealousy, out of nervousness, out of wanting to fit in? Once you admit, can you figure out why the jealousy, why the nervousness, why it's important to fit in or appear a certain way with this particular crowd? All of this helps us figure out who we are and what's going on. And it's definitely a skill that you can learn. It doesn't matter when you start, just start. As you begin on this journey, you can find that you've made decisions because of other people and ignoring your own life purposes and perhaps even what God has intended for you. Being able to examine your thoughts, your decisions, the motivations for your decisions will help you figure out where you should be and get back on the path that you should be on. And even if you choose not to be on that path, you will be making a conscious decision that you're not going on that path, rather than doing stuff unconsciously and 10, 15 years later down the line, realizing what you did. My next point is on honesty. Honesty with those that you love. My first disclaimer, though, is that honesty is especially with adults. I'm not saying lie to children, but our culture often leads us to share with children things that are inappropriate for their age. Many times we treat children like our confidants and our friends and burden them with things that they shouldn't know. We burden them with information that is for our age mates and those older than us. We need to be really careful about what we share with our children. Definitely be honest with them, but be cognizant of the age that they are and limit it to simple explanations with them. Be honest with those that you love and listen to them too, so that you can chart a path forward that would incorporate both of you. Again, this is something easier said than done, but it's also something that you can learn. We have a lot more knowledge available in our times, and it's helpful for us, but we need to be intentional about it. Healing happens in relationships, but we need honesty and care to achieve this on both ends. I think for me, this has been with my friendships and in my marriage, being able to tell these people what's going on with me and what I'm struggling with and what I'm discovering about myself and my healing process, keeping them in the loop, enable them to be there for me, and for us to also know what topics we can talk about and not, and how to navigate these things. I don't think I would have been able to do it without the community around me, and I'm grateful for them. But for your community to be there for you, you need to be honest with them about what you're going through. Also, as you are open to your community, do realize that some people can't be there for you because this triggers the parts of them that are wounded. Sometimes people are not yet ready to acknowledge their own wounding, and it's okay. Let them get there at their own pace. Some may never realize, and with others, as you begin to heal, you begin to see what is going on, if they were mistreating you, and you need to make decisions. All of this, however, allows you to curate relationships with people who love and care for you as you do for them. My next point is on books. I've always loved reading, and for me, an unfortunate side effect of the pandemic and lockdown is that it took away commutes. I used to love reading on my commute to work, and so now I've had to make time to read. There's so many books on these things, on healing from childhood trauma, to relationships, to parenting, to even building a community around yourself. It's important for you to seek out the information and then pick what works for you, leave what doesn't. On the healing.growth Instagram page, there's some of them. Some are available for sale, others are just recommended books. I find that I do like as well stories of people who have gone through similar things because it gives insight into how their minds work and the processes and solutions that they have. And it gives a good understanding for me. So I'd ask you, you're definitely not alone. One of the things about pain and grief is that there's a lie that you're the only one going through this thing, but you're not. And sometimes even just reading the stories gives you hope that if this person could go through this and get out, so can I. Another thing, journaling. So, journaling often gets a bad rap, but it is one of the things I definitely would recommend. However, you don't need to do it in the exact same way that everyone does it, and you can find ways that work for you. You can record voice notes on your phone. You can send them to yourself on an email. You can write emails to yourself, send them. You can record even videos. Right now, with the social media landscape, many of us are skilled at taking videos, and you can just do this as a diary and make it a diary for yourself. And it helps to vocalize your thoughts because it helps you see how you're thinking or processing, and it helps you get enough distance from the thing that you're going through to be able to figure out a way. Sometimes when everything is jumbled up in your mind and you're stressed about it, you're not always able to find a solution. But this is one of the ways that you can employ to help you get to a solution. I journal through conversations, voice notes, emails. I also write a lot, and sometimes finding the old journals and seeing where my heart and mind was at that particular moment and recognizing that as difficult as this thing was, I still was able to get through. It helps me appreciate the journey and just the person that I've become, because now I can recognize that things that made me feel like it was the end of the world really were not. So I've saved the last two. I feel like they're the biggest pieces of the puzzle. Therapy is my next point. I am a big believer in therapy. However, in the beginning, I struggled to find a therapist who understood what was going on with me. I think I found someone who understood and was able to work with me on the fourth try. Getting a good therapist is a combination of many things. It's like dating, almost, to get a good fit in terms of knowledge, philosophies, understanding of your particular issue. I learned that not all therapists are equipped to deal with mother wounds and childhood trauma. But when I found the ones who were, they unlocked a floodgate of emotions that I didn't even realize that I was carrying. and they help me navigate all this to the other side. I would say, don't be afraid to let go of a therapist and find a new one. It's not something that people talk about, but the right therapist will help you heal and grow in leaps and bounds. And I think for that one reason, it's important to just keep trying till you find the right one. Last but not least is prayer. This was one of my most important lifelines through my darkest times. And I know for many of us it also is. However, we sometimes feel like we're just not doing it right and have all of these hang-ups. What I'd say? Just literally be honest about what you're feeling and carrying in your soul. Ask for guidance, ask for help, for hope, for what you need to carry you through this. I fully believe in ask and you shall receive. And as you do this, I pray you receive every single thing that you need. And that's the end of our second episode. Let me know what you'd like to know, your own experiences, and what you'd like to share. I'm excited to hear from you. Thank you for listening to the Healing Growth podcast. You can find us on Instagram as healing.growth and on Facebook, Healing Growth. Do share this with your friends and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. My name is Saiton Riga, and bye-bye.